In the dim glow of Carthage's temple of Baal, young Hannibal kneels before his father, Hamilcar Barca. The scent of burning incense thickens the air. His father's stern eyes pierce through the smoke. "Swear, my son," Hamilcar commands, "that you will never be a friend to Rome." The boy's small hand trembles as he touches the sacred altar, his heart pounding with destiny. "I swear, father." Lightning flashes over the harbor, an omen of storms to come. The oath seals his fate, binding his soul to vengeance. Years pass. Hannibal grows under the burning sun of North Africa, training with soldiers and learning the art of war. His father teaches him strategy beside the maps of the Western Mediterranean. Hannibal's mind is sharp, his heart fiercer still. He rides horses through dust and wind, learning to command with eyes alone. The men whisper of him as the young lion. His ambition outpaces his age. His gaze is always toward Rome, the rival across the sea. On a campaign in Iberia, tragedy strikes. Hamilcar Barca drowns during a river crossing, his men screaming his name as the current pulls him under. Hannibal watches helplessly from the riverbank, feeling the foundation of his world crumble. The torches burn low that night as soldiers mourn the lion of Carthage. Hannibal, now hardened by grief, swears to continue his father's dream, to bring Rome to its knees. Hannibal serves under Hasdrubal the Fair, his brother-in-law, who governs Iberia with cunning diplomacy. Hannibal learns to lead, to negotiate, and to mask steel beneath silk. Yet, even in peace, his blood burns for conquest. At the bustling port of New Carthage, he studies Roman movements, their ships, their envoys, each a future enemy. Hasdrubal sees the fire in his eyes and warns, "Patience, Hannibal, your time will come." It does, sooner than either expects. Night falls, and treachery cuts through the calm. Hasdrubal is slain by a Celt assassin. The camp erupts into chaos. Hannibal, now in his mid-20s, rides among the soldiers to restore order. Their eyes turn to him, not as the son of Hamilcar, but as the leader destiny demands. The army roars his name under the Iberian moon. The torchlight reflects in his eyes. He accepts command with a clenched fist and a vow. Rome shall fall. Rome's ally, Saguntum, defies Carthage. Hannibal lays siege with merciless precision. The walls crumble after months of bombardment, and the city burns in crimson flames. The cries of the defeated echo through the hills as Roman envoys demand justice. Hannibal laughs coldly. He has crossed the point of no return. War with Rome is inevitable. The Second Punic War begins with the ashes of Saguntum. With war declared, Hannibal assembles one of history's greatest armies, 90,000 infantry, 12,000 cavalry, and 37 elephants. He points northward, toward Italy. The march through the Pyrenees and across Gaul is brutal. Rivers, tribes, and frost all stand in his way. Yet Hannibal's determination is unshakable. The men chant his name as they trudge into the mist-shrouded Alps, where gods themselves seem to test him. The Alps devour men and beasts alike. Avalanches roar, cliffs crumble, and cold turns flesh to stone. Hannibal walks among the fallen, his cloak frozen stiff, his face cut by wind and grief. Yet his eyes remain fierce. "Beyond these peaks lies Rome," he growls. The survivors, bound by his will alone, press onward. What emerges from the mountains is no longer an army, it is a legend. The Carthaginian cavalry smashes into Roman horsemen near the river Ticinus. Hannibal rides his black steed at the front, spear in hand, his brother Mago by his side. The charge is thunder itself. Roman lines break beneath the iron hooves. Hannibal's tactics are swift, deadly, flawless. Word spreads across Italy. The invincible son of Carthage has arrived. Winter grips northern Italy. Hannibal lures the Roman consul Sempronius into a freezing river valley. Hidden troops spring from ambush as Roman soldiers struggle in icy water. The trap closes, screams echo against the hills. When the sun sets, thousands of Romans lie dead or captured. Hannibal watches from a ridge, snow falling gently on his armor. His revenge has truly begun. The fog rises thick over Lake Trasimene as dawn paints the horizon in pale silver. Roman legions march along the shore, unaware of the invisible death waiting above. Hannibal, hidden with tens of thousands of men, signals silently. The Carthaginian horns blare, the trap closes like jaws of iron. Romans tumble into chaos as Hannibal's forces descend from the misty hills. The water turns crimson. Not a single Roman formation survives. It is one of the greatest ambushes in history. From the hills, Hannibal's voice rings, "Rome bleeds today." In Rome, panic spreads like wildfire. The Senate trembles at Hannibal's name. Mothers clutch their children as rumors fill the air. He is a demon from the desert. He walks with elephants. The Senate orders new consuls, new legions, and desperate defenses. But Hannibal moves like a phantom through Italy, his army fed by the fear of his enemies. Even the Roman allies begin to whisper that perhaps the gods favor Carthage. Rome appoints Quintus Fabius Maximus as dictator. His plan is unlike any before: avoid battle, harass supplies, and wear Hannibal down. Hannibal finds himself pursued but never engaged. He marches through fields of burning grain, unable to strike. The two minds, one patient, one predatory, circle each other across Italy. It becomes a war of intellect, a duel of endurance, and for the first time, Hannibal feels the sting of frustration. To draw out the Romans, Hannibal sets a trap of deception. He ties torches to the horns of cattle and drives them into the hills at night. Roman scouts, seeing moving lights, believe an army is escaping and rush into the dark. Suddenly, they are ambushed from all sides. Flames dance wildly across the valley as screams echo between the rocks. Hannibal rides through the firelight, his laughter cold and victorious. The combat is brutal and bloody. Under a merciless sun, near the town of Cannae, the might of Rome stands ready, nearly 80,000 men. Hannibal, outnumbered, arranges his troops in a crescent formation. As the Romans push forward, they are surrounded from all sides. The trap closes perfectly. Dust and death fill the air. Over 50,000 Romans perish in a single day. Blood soaks the earth as crows circle overhead. Hannibal stands amid the carnage, victorious but grim. "Rome," he whispers, "do you still think me mortal?" The field of Cannae lies silent, corpses stretching to the horizon. Hannibal surveys the ruin, knowing the gods demand payment for triumph. His officers beg him to march on Rome immediately, but his army is exhausted, his supplies thin, and reinforcements from Carthage delayed. He turns away from Rome's distant walls, haunted by what could have been. Even victory can taste of ashes. After Cannae, several Italian cities defect to Hannibal. Capua, rich and powerful, opens its gates to him. There, his men find luxury and rest, but it becomes a poison. The soldiers grow soft, indulgent, distracted by pleasure. Hannibal watches with quiet fury, realizing that the comforts of victory can destroy faster than the sword. Capua, he murmurs, is a greater enemy than Rome. Rome strikes back with cold vengeance, surrounding Capua with relentless legions. Hannibal rushes to aid his allies, but finds the city already doomed. The defenders starve and burn within their walls. Hannibal fights fiercely to break the siege, but cannot. Capua falls, and Rome makes an example. Its leaders are executed, its people enslaved. For the first time, Hannibal feels the weight of inevitability pressing down. In a bold stroke, Hannibal marches directly toward the eternal city. The countryside trembles as his elephants and cavalry thunder toward the gates of Rome itself. Panic floods the streets. Temples are sealed. Bells toll in terror. But Hannibal lacks siege engines and supplies. He cannot take the city. He halts before the walls, close enough to see Rome's towers glimmering in sunlight. Then, slowly, he turns away. Rome lives, but it will never forget that he stood at its doorstep. Hannibal retreats into the southern hills, harrying Roman forces for years. He becomes a legend, a phantom general who cannot be caught or crushed. The Romans whisper his name like a curse. Yet he knows time is no longer his ally. Reinforcements from Carthage never come. The tide of war begins to turn. As thunder rolls over the mountains, Hannibal stands alone on a ridge, cloak snapping in the wind, vowing that Carthage will never die while he breathes. Years have passed since Cannae. Hannibal, older and graver, faces relentless Roman pursuit. Near the Salaris River, he crushes another Roman army led by Marcus Centenius. Yet the victory feels hollow. The enemy always returns, stronger each time. Hannibal's veterans, their ranks thinned, stare silently at the bodies along the riverbank. Hannibal mutters to himself, "For every Roman we slay, two rise to take his place. Even victory now tastes like sorrow." At night, Hannibal dreams of Carthage. He sees the harbor's blue waters, the sandstone walls glowing beneath the sun, the faces of his childhood long gone. He wakes in a tent cold with dew, his elephants dying one by one in the damp Italian air. The men whisper prayers to strange gods, and Hannibal, staring into the embers, whispers a single word, home. But home has grown distant, and Carthage's heart grows colder with every unreturned message. Hope rekindles when news arrives. His brother Hannibal Barca has crossed the Alps, leading reinforcements from Spain. Hannibal's heart surges with new fire. He orders his troops to prepare for reunion, the Barca brothers together once more to strike at Rome. But fate, cruel and cunning, has other plans. The Romans move swiftly to intercept Hasdrubal before the brothers can unite. Tragedy unfolds at the Metaurus River. Hasdrubal's army is destroyed, his men slaughtered. When the Romans find his body, they decapitate him and send his head to Hannibal's camp. That night, Hannibal sits in silence as the severed head of his brother is thrown before him. His officers wait for orders, but none come. Tears, silent and rare, streak the general's face. "I recognize the fortune of Carthage," he whispers, voice broken by grief. For years, Hannibal becomes a ghostly presence in Italy, striking swiftly, vanishing into the mountains. His army survives by cunning and endurance, avoiding pitched battles. The Romans, led by Scipio and others, slowly tighten the noose. Hannibal's veterans, scarred and weary, remain fiercely loyal. Around their fires they sing songs of home and lost comrades, while Hannibal stares into the distance, his mind a storm of memory and defiance. News reaches Hannibal that Scipio Africanus has landed near Carthage. The Senate, desperate and fearful, sends an urgent summons. "Return, Hannibal Barca. Save your homeland." Hannibal looks across the Italian fields that have been his battlefield for 16 years. He feels the weight of every life lost, every city burned. He orders the retreat. The dream of conquering Rome fades into the wind as his ships turn south toward the shores of Africa. Carthage greets Hannibal with cheers and tears. The city that once doubted him now kneels before its returning hero. Yet he sees decay beneath the surface, weak leaders, divided councils, and a people softened by comfort. Hannibal, hardened by decades of war, senses doom. He walks through the streets of his youth, touching the walls, feeling the ghosts of what Carthage once was. "I have returned," he says quietly, "but too late." Before battle, Hannibal meets Scipio Africanus near Zama. The two greatest generals of their age face each other, one scarred by loss, the other shining with youth and ambition. Hannibal speaks first. "Let us end this war with words, not blood." Scipio listens, respectful yet firm. "You taught me to fight, Hannibal," he says. "Now I will defeat you." They part with mutual respect, knowing the next day will decide the fate of empires. The plains of Zama erupt in thunder. Hannibal commands his war elephants, but Scipio's tactics turn them back in panic. Roman and Numidian cavalry strike from both sides, crushing the Carthaginian wings. Hannibal fights in the thick of battle, his sword red, his cloak torn. For hours he holds the line, but the gods have chosen. The great general watches his army break and fall. Carthage is lost. The dream ends in dust and silence. After defeat, Hannibal flees Carthage to escape Roman vengeance. He wanders through the courts of foreign kings, Tyre, Antioch, Bithynia, offering counsel, teaching strategy, but never finding peace. He becomes a legend in life, a teacher of war, and a symbol of defiance. Yet in his solitude he whispers to the sea, "I could have destroyed Rome if Carthage had stood with me." His eyes, once burning with fire, now reflect only the memory of glory. Far from his homeland, Hannibal journeys through the courts of the eastern kings. In Tyre, his ancestral city, the people bow as he passes, whispering his name as if he were a god of war. Yet Hannibal feels only emptiness. He gazes upon the Mediterranean, the same sea he once crossed to challenge Rome, and feels the bitter taste of distance. "The sea unites and divides," he murmurs. "It gave me victory and exile." The waves crash endlessly, as though mocking time itself. Hannibal finds refuge at the court of King Antiochus III of Syria. The palace gleams with marble and gold, filled with scholars and generals who whisper about the legendary Carthaginian. Antiochus greets him with admiration. "Your name alone is worth an army," the king declares. Hannibal advises him on how to fight Rome, drawing maps and strategies on the floor with his staff. Yet Hannibal sees hesitation in the king's heart. He knows Rome's shadow terrifies even the mighty of the East. Hannibal urges Antiochus to invade Italy as he once did, but the king's counsel is full of fear. Rome's power is divine, one advisor warns. Hannibal rises, eyes blazing. "Divine? I have seen their soldiers bleed like any man." His voice echoes through the chamber, silencing all. Yet pride and caution paralyze the court. Hannibal realizes that though he once commanded legions, he now commands only words. His genius, sharper than ever, is wasted on cowards. When Rome finally confronts Antiochus at Magnesia, Hannibal's advice is ignored. The Syrian army is crushed, and the proud king flees in disgrace. Hannibal escapes before the Romans can reach him. Once again he is hunted, an exile among exiles. "Even the East trembles at their name," he mutters. Rome's empire grows not by strength alone, but by fear. He wraps his worn cloak tighter, vanishing into the dust of another foreign land. Years pass. Hannibal seeks shelter in the small kingdom of Bithynia under King Prusias. Here he finds a strange peace, teaching strategy, training soldiers, and walking among olive groves. Children follow him, listening to his tales of elephants and mountains. Yet his heart remains restless. "I have lived among kings and beggars," he tells a young student, "but never among free men." His spirit, still fierce, feels trapped in a world that has forgotten its fire. One morning, a Roman envoy arrives in Bithynia. His message is simple: Rome demands the surrender of Hannibal Barca. The old general laughs, a sound half bitter, half amused. "Even now they fear me," he says. The envoy's silence is answer enough. Hannibal knows there will be no escape this time. The hunter has become the hunted, yet even surrounded, he feels no fear. "Tell them," he says quietly, "that I am still Hannibal." Night falls, thunder rumbles over the sea. Hannibal sits by a window, wrapped in a cloak, writing his last words. Let us rid Rome of her anxiety about one old man. He raises the vial in salute to his father, his brothers, his soldiers, and to the gods who watched his struggle. Then, with a calm breath, he drinks. The poison burns like fire, but his expression softens. A faint smile crosses his lips as his heart grows still. Roman soldiers move through Bithynia, searching for him. Hannibal's loyal followers plead for him to flee once more, but he shakes his head. "I have fled long enough. No Roman shall ever lay hands upon me." He retreats to a small villa on the coast, watching ships move like shadows on the sea. The air smells of rain and salt. He prepares a vial of poison, the last weapon left to him, a soldier's choice. At dawn, the storm clears. Locals find Hannibal lifeless in his chair, the sea wind moving his cloak like a final salute. The Romans arrive too late. They stand in silence, gazing upon the body of the man who terrified their legions for decades. One soldier whispers, "Even in death he denies us victory." The waves crash against the cliffs below, carrying his spirit back toward Carthage, toward legend. Years turn to centuries, Empires rise and fall, yet the name Hannibal endures. In Rome itself, his tactics are studied by generals who once called him monster. His legend becomes myth, half hero, half demon. But those who look deeper see the truth, a man of vision, courage, and relentless will. From the temples of Carthage to the halls of Rome, his spirit whispers to every warrior who defies the impossible. The Lion of Carthage never truly dies. The Senate hall was filled with a dreadful silence as the messengers entered, their faces pale and armor still stained with dust from the battlefield. When the words, "Cannae is lost," echoed through the marble chamber, Rome's senators bowed their heads in disbelief. Mothers wept in the streets, and the city braced itself for the unthinkable, Hannibal marching upon their gates. Yet, amidst the sorrow, a cold determination arose. Rome will never surrender. Victorious yet cautious, Hannibal stood upon a hill overlooking the distant city of Rome. His generals urged him forward, strike now, but he knew the walls were strong, the people desperate. Without siege equipment and supplies, such an attack would be folly. Instead, he chose patience, hoping Rome's allies would turn against her. The city's red roofs glowed under the sun, so near, yet so far. Hannibal entered the gates of Capua, the wealthy city that had finally chosen his side after Cannae. The people cheered him as a liberator, offering wine, gold, and troops. Yet indulgence seeped in. His soldiers, weary from years of war, found rest and pleasure in Capua's luxury. Hannibal watched with quiet unease. He knew softness could undo even the fiercest army. Rome's new strategy came with an old man's wisdom. Quintus Fabius Maximus, called the Delayer, refused to meet Hannibal in open battle. He shadowed the Carthaginian army, cutting off supplies, harassing foragers, burning crops. Hannibal's fury grew as victory without battle became impossible. Rome had learned to fight his way, slowly, cunningly. At dawn, near the silent lake of Trasimene, thick fog rolled in, veiling everything in white. Hannibal used it as his ally, positioning troops unseen around the narrow path. The Roman army, marching blind, found itself surrounded. When the fog lifted, chaos reigned, screams, steel, and water stained red. The trap had sprung perfectly, another Roman army annihilated. Rome's streets echoed with mourning. Every family had lost someone, sons, fathers, brothers. Yet the city refused to yield. Women donated their jewelry for the war effort, and new legions of barely trained boys took up arms. The Senate swore oaths of vengeance, their hearts hardened like iron. The fight against Hannibal had become a holy war for Rome's survival. Snow fell softly over Hannibal's camp in southern Italy. His soldiers huddled near fires, their armor dull and their spirits low. Supplies dwindled and disease spread. Hannibal walked among them, sharing their rations, offering words of endurance. He gazed north, knowing reinforcements from Carthage would never come. Alone, he stood against an empire. Maharbal, Hannibal's loyal cavalry commander, rode to his general's tent, his eyes blazing with urgency. "You know how to win battles," he said bitterly, "but not how to use victory." He wanted to march on Rome immediately after Cannae, but Hannibal refused. Years later, those words echoed like a curse through history, a chance forever lost. Far away, a young Roman named Publius Cornelius Scipio rose from the ashes of defeat. He had seen Hannibal's brilliance and vowed to match it. Studying his tactics, learning from his victories, Scipio prepared to take the war to Africa itself. A new rival was born, the only one capable of ending Hannibal's legend. Despite weariness, Hannibal's spirit burned bright. He led his remaining army into the field once more, facing Rome's renewed legions. Though the odds had shifted, his mind was sharper than ever, his maneuvers still elegant, his courage undimmed. Each battle was now not for conquest, but for glory, for the name Barca to live forever. The tide of war shifted as Rome adapted. Hannibal's once invincible army was now isolated, cut off from reinforcements and supplies. The Roman general Claudius Nero struck at Hannibal's brother, Hasdrubal, who was marching south with aid. Hasdrubal fell in battle, his head sent to Hannibal's camp, a gruesome message that broke even his iron heart. The war that began in glory had become a fight for survival. Rome's vengeance fell upon Capua, the city that had once opened its gates to Hannibal. The legions surrounded it, cutting off all escape. When the city finally fell, its leaders were executed, its people enslaved. Hannibal arrived too late to save them. Standing before the burning ruins, he whispered bitterly, "Rome remembers everything." Cities that once hailed Hannibal as a liberator now turned their backs. Fear of Rome's retribution spread like wildfire. Tarentum, once an ally, fell to Roman hands. The Italian tribes withdrew, seeking peace. Hannibal stood alone in the peninsula he had conquered, surrounded by enemies and betrayal. Yet his resolve was unbroken. He would fight to the end. Across the sea, the young Scipio Africanus brought war to Carthage's doorstep. Landing in North Africa, he allied with the Numidian king Massinissa, whose cavalry would prove decisive. Carthage trembled, and the elders, desperate and afraid, sent messengers to summon Hannibal home. For the first time in years, he turned his face south, toward home, toward destiny. Hannibal stood upon the southern coast of Italy, his boots sinking into the sand. Behind him lay years of blood and triumph. Before him, the dark waters of the Mediterranean. He gazed toward the horizon, the same path he had once crossed as a boy of Carthage. He whispered farewell to the land that had both exalted and devoured him, then boarded the ship bound for home. Carthage greeted its hero with awe and fear. Years had passed since his departure, and though he returned undefeated, the city had grown cautious, weakened by politics and fear of Rome. Hannibal's hair was streaked with gray, but his presence still commanded respect. As he entered the council hall, the elders bowed, not out of love, but out of necessity. On the plains of Zama, two giants finally met, Hannibal and Scipio. The African sun burned fiercely as both armies faced each other, tens of thousands strong. Elephants roared, Roman horns answered. In the center of the battlefield, the two commanders rode forward, meeting face to face. Hannibal, calm and grave, acknowledged Scipio's brilliance. "The fate of empires," he said, "lies between us." The air thundered as Hannibal unleashed his war elephants, their charge shaking the earth. But Scipio had prepared. Trumpets blared, and the Roman lines parted, letting the beasts pass harmlessly through. Then came the Numidian cavalry, swift as lightning, striking Hannibal's flanks. Steel clashed, banners fell, and at last Carthage's great general was defeated. The legend met its mortal wound. Defeated but unbroken, Hannibal rode from the battlefield with dignity. He had lost the war, but not his honor. Turning to his officers, he said, "Rome may have conquered Carthage, but not Hannibal." His army was gone, his homeland humbled, yet his name would echo through eternity. Even his enemies whispered it with respect. To avoid Roman vengeance, Hannibal fled Carthage and began a life of wandering. He traveled from court to court, advising kings and teaching generals. Wherever he went, his presence commanded awe. Yet he was hunted, haunted, and always alone. In his twilight years, he would rather die free than kneel to Rome. The lion had left Africa, but his shadow still loomed large across history. Night cloaked the harbor of Carthage as Hannibal boarded a small ship bound for Tyre. Behind him, his city slept uneasily under Roman watch. The waves whispered like ghosts of fallen soldiers. Hannibal stood at the stern, wrapped in his worn cloak, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. He had once crossed the sea to bring Rome to its knees. Now he crossed it as a hunted man. The voyage carried Hannibal to Phoenicia, the ancient land of his ancestors. The people of Tyre, proud of their Carthaginian kinship, welcomed him with reverence. In the temple of Melkart, the same god worshipped as Hercules in Rome, he knelt and whispered prayers for his lost soldiers. The scent of burning incense filled the air as the greatest general of Carthage sought peace among his roots. Word of Hannibal's presence spread swiftly across the eastern kingdoms. Kings and courtiers whispered his name, the man who defied Rome. From Antioch came an invitation. King Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire sought his counsel against the rising Roman power. Seeing a chance to strike once more at his old enemy, Hannibal accepted. The legend was not yet finished. The halls of Antioch were resplendent with gold, silk, and marble. Hannibal entered the royal court, where Antiochus III awaited upon a throne of ivory. Courtiers watched in awe as the scarred, silver-haired general of Carthage spoke with calm authority. He unfolded strategies, maps, and visions of victory. Even the great king listened in silence, captivated by the brilliance of the man from the west. In a candle-lit chamber, Hannibal outlined his plan for the king, a lightning strike across the Mediterranean to invade Italy and awaken old allies. But the courtiers, proud and cautious, rejected his audacity. They wanted battles fought on their own soil, not in distant lands. Hannibal's jaw tightened. He had seen this before, politics choking courage. He realized Antiochus had the gold of kings, but not the heart of conquerors. When war came, it was too late. The Romans struck swiftly and decisively. Antiochus's armies were crushed at Magnesia, his empire humiliated. Hannibal, who had warned of this defeat, watched from the sidelines, powerless to alter fate. Once again, the shadow of Rome stretched across the world, devouring empires as it had devoured his dream. Hunted by Roman agents, Hannibal fled east once more, first to Crete, then to Bithynia. He disguised himself, living among fishermen and traders, always one step ahead of his pursuers. Yet wherever he went, he was recognized. Children whispered his name, elders bowed. Even in exile, he commanded awe. The lion had lost his kingdom, but not his legend. In Bithynia, Hannibal found refuge under King Prusias I, who sought his aid against a rival. Hannibal, ever the strategist, designed ingenious naval traps, using pots filled with venomous snakes hurled onto enemy ships. The enemy fleet panicked and fled. Even in his final years, his mind remained a weapon sharper than any sword. Rome could not rest while Hannibal lived. Ambassadors came to Bithynia, demanding his surrender. King Prusias hesitated, torn between gratitude and fear. When Hannibal learned of their plot, he smiled faintly. He had outrun Rome for decades, but he would never be delivered to them alive. "Let us end this chase," he said softly. "Rome shall not have my chains." Alone in a small stone house by the sea, Hannibal took the vial of poison he had long carried with him. He raised it in a final toast to fate. "Let Rome be rid of her fear," he murmured, "when an old man dies." Then he drank. The waves outside crashed like drums of war as the greatest general of the ancient world breathed his last. His body fell still, but his name, Hannibal Barca, became eternal. When the dawn rose over the coast of Bithynia, the servants found Hannibal lifeless, seated beside his bed with the faintest trace of calm upon his face. The vial lay at his feet, its contents spilled into the sand. Word of his death spread like fire across the Mediterranean. In Rome, senators breathed relief, but in the hearts of soldiers and scholars alike there was a strange, quiet sorrow. Even enemies mourned him. In the Forum of Rome, news of Hannibal's death reached the Senate. Some celebrated, others merely nodded in grim acknowledgment. Scipio Africanus, now old and weary, heard the words in silence. "He was the greatest of them all," he said softly. "Even in defeat, he taught Rome how to conquer." The remark lingered in history, an epitaph spoken by his most worthy rival. Hannibal's body was never found. The people of Bithynia buried him in secret, fearing Roman wrath. They marked the site with only a simple stone, bearing no name. Yet sailors claimed that on quiet nights the waves near that shore whispered his name, and strange lights flickered above the sea, as if the spirit of the great Carthaginian still roamed, restless and eternal. Years after Hannibal's death, Rome turned its wrath upon Carthage once more. The Third Punic War ended in fire. The city burned for 17 days. As Roman soldiers razed the temples and salted the earth, some whispered Hannibal's name as if invoking a ghost. They said if he had lived, Carthage would never have fallen. His shadow still guarded the city, even as it crumbled. Generations later, Roman writers recorded his story, not merely as an enemy, but as a genius. Polybius, Livy, and others wrote of his unmatched courage and intellect. "He taught Rome the art of fear," one wrote, "and from that fear we learned greatness." The pen, centuries later, gave him a new kind of victory, a triumph in memory rather than in war. From Julius Caesar to Napoleon, centuries of commanders studied Hannibal's campaigns. They marveled at his crossing of the Alps, his tactical brilliance at Cannae, his mastery of deception and mobility. Hannibal became the eternal teacher of warfare, the general whom even time could not outmaneuver. His strategies became scripture for every soldier who dreamed of greatness. In marble halls and military academies, debates raged for centuries. Who was greater, Hannibal or Scipio? Rome's victor or Carthage's genius? Yet, in the whispers of history, there was a strange balance. Without Hannibal's brilliance, Scipio would never have risen. Together, they defined an age, two minds locked in eternal opposition, each incomplete without the other. Roman mothers once warned their children, "Hannibal is at the gates." The phrase outlived the man by centuries, becoming legend. It symbolized not merely a warrior, but an idea. The unstoppable force that challenges empires, the embodiment of audacity. Hannibal became myth, half man, half memory, forever haunting the imagination of a world that both feared and admired him. In distant lands, Africa, Europe, the East, Hannibal's name inspired rulers who rose long after his death. His strategies were copied, his boldness emulated. In every daring general who faced impossible odds, there was a spark of Hannibal Barca. His legend transcended nations, becoming not just Carthaginian or Roman, but universal, belonging to all who defied fate. Centuries turned to millennia, yet the story of Hannibal Barca endured. His spirit lived not in stone or empire, but in the hearts of those who refused surrender. The boy who swore eternal hatred against Rome had become something greater, an immortal idea of courage, intellect, and defiance. The Lion of Carthage still roars in history's echo. Centuries after the fall of Carthage, scholars of the Renaissance dusted off ancient scrolls and found his name again, Hannibal Barca. Artists, poets, and philosophers marveled at his defiance, at the courage that carried him over the Alps and through the fire of empire. To them, Hannibal was not merely a general, but a symbol of human ambition itself, a man who dared to challenge destiny. In Florence, historians compared Hannibal's strategies to those of Machiavelli's The Prince. They saw in him the perfect union of intellect and boldness, a master of manipulation and a student of fate. The written word resurrected him, transforming his campaigns into lessons of power and philosophy. The conqueror who had lived by the sword now conquered again through the pen. Painters began to immortalize Hannibal's great journey across the Alps. On vast canvases, elephants trudged through snow and mist, their riders bearing the banner of Carthage. These paintings were not mere depictions, they were testaments to humanity's will to overcome the impossible. Each brushstroke echoed his eternal march toward glory. As Europe waged its own wars of empire, military leaders studied Hannibal's mind. From Spain to France to Prussia, generals drew inspiration from his audacity and precision. They saw in him not a barbarian enemy, but the ultimate tactician. Hannibal became a silent advisor across centuries, a voice whispering strategy into the ears of kings. When Napoleon crossed the Alps in his own campaign, he famously declared, "Hannibal showed me the way." Riding through the same mountain passes, he felt the spirit of his Carthaginian predecessor beside him. History had come full circle, one conqueror walking in the footprints of another. The Alps once more echoed with the thunder of ambition. In later centuries, historians debated Hannibal's legacy. Was he a doomed idealist or a visionary genius? Some said fate betrayed him. Others said Carthage did. Yet all agreed his mind was unmatched, his story unparalleled. His defeat was not a failure, but a testament to the limits of mortal greatness. Even in loss, he transcended time. Long after the dust of Carthage had vanished, the words Hannibal spoke as a child endured. "I swear eternal hatred against Rome." The oath became legend, a symbol of passion, loyalty, and defiance. It was not hatred alone that defined it, but conviction. In that oath lay the spirit of those who dared to stand against impossibility itself. In the imagination of mankind, Hannibal never stopped marching. Artists dreamed of him crossing not mountains, but centuries. His elephants walked through clouds. His soldiers climbed through the ages. The Alps became a metaphor for human endurance. Every generation faced its own mountains to conquer, guided by the spirit of the man who never turned back. Across museums and city squares, statues of Hannibal began to rise again. In bronze and marble, he stood gazing toward Rome, his cloak sweeping like a wave behind him. Children read his story. Soldiers saluted his courage. The enemy of Rome had become a hero of mankind. His likeness stood not as a conqueror, but as a reminder: greatness is born from struggle. 1,000 years after his death, his name still carried the weight of legend. Hannibal Barca, the man who dared to defy an empire. The boy who swore an oath. The general who marched across the Alps. His story transcended history, becoming poetry, memory, and myth. Empires rose and fell, but his legend endured, an eternal flame in the heart of human courage. The waves whispered against the ruins of ancient Carthage. Broken pillars and shattered mosaics shimmered under the setting sun, and the cries of gulls echoed like ghosts. Yet among the fragments of marble and sand there lingered something invisible, a presence. The spirit of Hannibal still walked there, unseen but eternal, guarding the memory of a city that once challenged Rome's might. In the shifting sands of North Africa, archaeologists uncovered ancient Carthaginian relics, coins stamped with elephants, broken armor, and faded inscriptions bearing Hannibal's name. Each find reignited fascination with the man who had defied Rome's destiny. The desert, which had swallowed empires, offered back fragments of his immortality. In war academies and universities, generals and scholars still studied Hannibal's campaigns, his flanking maneuvers at Cannae, his ambushes in Italy. Each became a model of tactical genius. On classroom walls, maps of his routes adorned the spaces where young minds dreamed of strategy. He had become more than a man. He was a philosophy of warfare, a blueprint of brilliance. A poet in a quiet study by the Mediterranean composed verses about Hannibal's soul, a fire that never faded, a man who lived between dream and defiance. His pen moved like a sword, cutting through centuries of dust. Through rhythm and word, Hannibal was reborn once more, not as a conqueror, but as an idea, the eternal pursuit of greatness. In a small classroom near modern Tunis, a teacher told her students the story of Hannibal Barca, the boy who swore an oath and crossed mountains to challenge an empire. The children's eyes widened with wonder. To them, he was not just history, but a hero of imagination. In that moment, his spirit found new life in the hearts of the young. High in the Alps, where the snow still whispers of ancient marches, travelers paused to look upon a stone marker. Here passed Hannibal and his army, 218 BCE. The wind howled through the valleys as though echoing the trumpets of elephants. Nature itself seemed to remember him. The mountains he conquered now stood as his silent memorial. In Rome, tourists walked through the ruins of the Colosseum and the Forum, unaware that beneath their feet lay the memory of the man Rome could never truly conquer. Statues of Roman generals stood proud, yet their shadows stretched toward the horizon where Carthage once stood. Even in death, Hannibal remained the rival that defined Rome's greatness. A young historian stood at a museum display of Hannibal's campaign, staring at the path drawn in red across the Alps. She felt the chill of snow, the fear of soldiers, the roar of elephants. In her reflection on the glass, she saw not a conqueror, but a human being driven by destiny. Hannibal became a mirror for all who dared to dream beyond limitation. Through storms, wars, and centuries, the flame of Hannibal's legend burned on. His courage inspired not only warriors, but thinkers, artists, and rebels. He stood as proof that even those who lose can become immortal if they fight for something greater than victory. Hannibal Barca, his story was no longer about conquest, but about the spirit that never yields. As the stars shimmered above the Mediterranean, one burned brighter than the rest. In the celestial silence, it bore his name, the eternal soul of Hannibal Barca, the boy who swore an oath, the man who crossed the impossible, the legend who defied time itself. Empires crumble, names fade, but his endures. For Hannibal lives not in monuments or books, but in the undying courage of humankind.